My first assignment as a priest was St. Thomas Aquinas in Avondale. Really spectacular times. One of my first years of priesthood, I was guiding a couple who was preparing for marriage. Delightful conversations, and I kind of talked to them one-on-one, separated the two of them. And one of the questions I asked was, describe for me your lived experience of God. And they kind of stared at me like, what do you mean, Father? I said, no, just tell me, what is your experience of God? How would you describe your faith, and your relationship with God? And this one gentleman kind of listed, I don't really practice the faith. I sometimes go to Mass. And I was like, okay, but do you have a relationship with God? What does that look like? And he says, no, I don't. Sometimes I prayed, but I don't really get anything out. I don't really hear anything. So he was kind of expressing to me, I don't think I don't have an experience of God. So then I asked him, well, has there ever been a moment in your life where you just kind of spontaneously felt gratitude? And he paused and he really thought about it, and he says, actually, Father, when this was a gentleman who had a child before marriage, he says, Father, when my son was born, I remember holding him for the first time, and I just felt tears well up in my eyes, and I just said, thank you. I said, isn't that interesting? Who were you thinking? You had a spontaneous experience of God showing you himself. Today's Feast of the Epiphany is reminding us of something we hear in the Catechism, the very first paragraph. I've been doing, during Advent and Christmas, I've been using the Hallow app that we purchased for the parishioners here, and I figured I should probably see what it's all about. And I've actually really enjoyed it. It's helped me slow down in my prayer. But one of the things I've started listening to is this new series. It's a podcast called Catechism in a Year. Father Mike Schmitz reads a few paragraphs at a time every day from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is an epic book that captures everything the Church teaches. I spent a year and a half studying this thing in seminary, and Father Mike Schmitz is going to walk us through these bite-sized meditations and learning from the Catechism. Anyways, I've enjoyed that. And I loved hearing him read the very first paragraphs that says this. Explaining why God created, it says that out of an act of sheer goodness, God created us. Since he was perfectly happy and content in himself, he's not needy. If he was needy, then he would be a creature. But God isn't just some big creature out there. He is the source of life. Anyways, and it says, therefore, at all times and in every place, God draws near to us. In a nutshell, that's what this feast is about. It's reminding us that always, it's like the sun. It can't help but shine. And those rays go out. And they go hundreds of light years to touch us. That's a tiny, a pathetic analogy for the radiance with which God shines and approaches us. He insists on saving us. So, I think how it's important for us to reflect, how has God touched my life? And I may not have thought of it as God, but it's a reminder to us to notice, like that gentleman who noticed this gratitude, this something other that he experienced at the birth of his first child. But perhaps many of you, like me, have had experiences where we were just very aware of God's blessing. Some of the things that have really happened. One example is I always go back to my retreat. A retreat I went on when I was in youth group. I was 14 years old. It was probably October and the year was 2004. And it was during a time of adoration on this retreat that I just experienced this deep sense of love, of being loved. And that changed everything for me. From that moment on, I started to ask God, what do you want me to do with my life? Out of that came the possibility of priesthood in my imagination. And I started to pay very close attention to what priests were doing at Mass. Anyways, I had my whole long journey, and I've had all kinds of ups and downs, but to this day, I go back often and try to savor again that experience I had, because a truth was revealed to me, that there is a God who is near and who's calling me. And in times when I don't feel that, I remember the truth of it, and I savor the experience in my memory, and that helps me tremendously. It's a pivotal moment that changed my life. It's part of why I am a priest today. I wouldn't be a priest today without that manifestation of God's presence to me in such an intense way. I could talk about all kinds of other things, but I want you and I to ponder today anew, how is God revealing himself? Where have you experienced spontaneous realizations of goodness? I guarantee you, if you've had an intense, unexpected, unplanned experience spontaneously of tremendous goodness that changed your life, it's probably God. Savor that. Pay attention. If there was an experience where you just suddenly, like for example, when I was in seminary, I had a moment of experiencing truth that changed me dramatically. One day I was studying for an exam, and I was very anxious about this exam, and studying philosophy is the worst. It's so hard. It's like complicated language. I'm racking my brain over these concepts, and one of the things we were talking about philosophically was time. And how time is measuring the passage of change, and in heaven, there won't be time. And that freaked me out. But it made me think a lot. And I remember it was just this moment of realizing this truth that God somehow is this goodness and love that will endure outside of time, and it won't change. It's hard for me to describe for you what that was like, but my point is, I was reading something and I had this moment that really changed the way I thought about God. And that happened multiple times in seminary, where it helped me realize that God's analogously a lot more like an ocean than just some sort of a creature I can like kind of pull out and talk to at times, but an ocean that I can kind of sit in and realize that, or it's like the sun that's constantly radiating on me. And to pause and notice its warmth and its light is something I can do. I can tap into that anywhere at all times. I digress. Where have you experienced truth? Go back to that. Because any experience, intense manifestation of goodness or truth or beauty is an experience of the presence of the source. When you go out and you feel the warmth of the sun, you are experiencing the sun, even though it's so far away. So analogously, even though I don't see Jesus as like a creature here that I can point out to you, even though I can point him out in the mystery of the Eucharist, even though I can't quite see him as he is, this side of heaven, I can experience him. And what I experience in goodness and truth and beauty is him. Now, we remember the Magi who brought Jesus 3 gifts. Three Magi brought a gift: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So today, as we contemplate how God is coming near to us at all times, wanting to reveal himself, and we have had these moments of intense manifestation, I invite you and I to remember that requires a response. Religion is not a spectator sport. The man who was profoundly filled with gratitude at the birth of his child had to make a change. There has to be something we do in response. There was a different dad at St. Thomas Aquinas who told me when his first child was born, his wife was having a lot of complications. So the doctors needed to attend to his wife. It was kind of an emergency situation. So once the child was born, they kind of wiped him down and then handed the child to his dad and then kicked them out of the hospital room because they had to do an emergency procedure on his wife. So this father, young father, finds himself with his newborn son in the hallway of this hospital by himself. And he says, he stared at this baby and he said out loud, "I don't know you." It was this profound moment of realizing this is a human being, a person. I don't know him yet. And it was so curious for me to hear him recount that experience, because what I saw in this man was he had spent so much of his energy trying to spend time with his son. His son at that point was probably 8 years old. And I saw how they spent time together, they did sports together. He tried to make sure he learned his faith. All this that he invested, knowing that this is a unique person that he's still going to get to know. He has no idea how he's going to grow up to be. So the revelation of a God similarly should invoke in us the desire to get to know and make a response, to invest time. Maybe 3 things we can consider today. What I invite you is to notice. Pay attention. We have to invest energy to notice what is going on in my life. Too often we just let life happen instead of engaging it and paying attention. When we pay attention, we tend to notice and we can appreciate, even reflectively, what's happening in my life. Where do I feel close to God? What were moments that I felt distant from God? When we notice that, then we can start to understand. When we start to reflect, try to understand our experience, then we can make a decision to act. If it's from God, to choose more of it, or to protect it, or to change the way I live, to live according to this new truth I've learned, or to act against what is not of God, to start pushing back against the things that pull us into egoism or isolation. So that is maybe one little formula. Notice, understand, act. I wish it formed a really cool acronym, but it's just NOAH. Sorry. But that perhaps can be a reminder to us that God at all times and everywhere draws close to us. And He's quiet, He's patient, but He hopes for a response.